In autumn of 2021, following the announcement that controversial Doctor Who showrunner Chris Chibnall would be leaving the show a year later with a final feature-length special providing a swan song to both his Doctor and his era as a whole, it was announced that former showrunner Russell T Davies would be stepping back into the role, beginning with a trilogy of specials celebrating the show's 60th anniversary to air in November 2023. Along with this news came the announcement that Ncuti Gatwa would play the new 14th Doctor, along with the additional announcement that fan favourite Doctor companion duo David Tennant and Catherine Tate would be reprising their roles as the Doctor and Donna Noble for these specials. At the time, it was not known what the nature of the two's return would be, with many, myself included, assuming that this would be a multi-Doctor event featuring the 10th Doctor and Donna. This ultimately proved to be false, as it was revealed that Tennant would in fact be playing the 14th Doctor, a brand new incarnation mysteriously bearing the same face as a previous one, and finding himself once again inexplicably drawn towards Donna Noble, while Gatwa would then succeed him as the 15th Doctor. With these specials would begin a new era for Doctor Who, not merely in the showrunning sense, but also in that the marketing for this era presented it as a new revival for the show, as a season 1 for new viewers to jump in and see what all the fuss is about, unburdened by heavy amounts of complicated lore. This new era would take on a fresh tone, with heightened budgets allowing for more ambitious episodes than what could be achieved previously. With the era of Ncuti Gatwa's 15th Doctor now concluded, and the show's future once again in uncertain territory, I feel it justified to review these efforts and see how well these episodes stand up not just on their own, but also compared to the output Doctor Who has had in years past. I will be reviewing this entire era across the course of multiple videos, this being the first, and will also be ranking the episodes as I go because I want to, and if that annoys you, get a hobby. So without further ado, let us begin. The triumphant return of the creative team behind the beloved Series 4 of Doctor Who begins with the first of the three 60th anniversary specials, The Star Beast, based on a comic from Doctor Who magazine in 1980, originally by Pat Mills, John Wagner, and Dave Gibbons, and adapted for television by Russell T Davies. The Star Beast is a story that has the unenviable task of reuniting Donna and the Doctor, and finding a way around Donna's fate from 16 years prior, which cursed her to die if she ever remembered her travels with the Doctor, as a result of a meta-crisis that planted a Time Lord mind into her human brain. It does this while also introducing a new side character, Donna's daughter Rose, played by Yasmin Finney, and having the main science fiction plot be that of a rogue alien known as the Meep, being hunted by the mysterious and dangerous Rarth warriors. The Meep initially appears to be peaceful and innocent, but soon the Meep's true nature is revealed as a plot to burn London in order to kickstart a crashed spaceship and evade capture once again. So in my opinion, does it pull all of this off successfully? The answer isn't as black or white as one might hope. This episode does contain quite a lot of good material. Tennant and Tate are as always a phenomenal duo, capable of constantly matching and elevating each other's performances, perfectly demonstrated in the heartbreaking scene where Donna's meta-crisis mind returns. The Meep is a camp and enjoyable villain with a fun heel turn from the initial cute and cuddly persona. It's a classic Doctor Who antagonist to the core, as
These are
well as being
toys.
just
Humans have
absolutely
toys.
hilarious.
You've got stuffing inside.
Hey, you pulled its tummy out.
No, keep it down. Don't be so loud.
Even the idea of the meta-crisis passing down from mother to daughter is a clever way to show the Doctor's lasting impact on the lives of the Noble family. Donna giving away the lottery money that was the Doctor's final gift to her is also an interesting angle to take on the residual effects of the Doctor's influence. This episode is also host to some absolutely gorgeous sets that really do create an immersive environment for the episode's action to take place in. The seed of the Doctor beginning to open up more emotionally is also planted here, which sets up changes to come in a very satisfying way. The Meep insidiously bonding with Rose over shared feelings of being outcasts is also an excellent little moment of character work. And once again I cannot stress enough how strong their performances are from the main cast. It is truly electric to watch Tennant and Tate step so effortlessly back into roles that they last inhabited 13 years prior, instantly reviving the vibrant and lively rapport that had once cemented the 10th Doctor and Donna as one of the greatest TARDIS teams to ever do it. However, with all of the good, there is sadly also a chunk of bad to get through, even going beyond the usual fanboy nitpicks like the sonic screwdriver just doing whatever the plot demands. The best example of this episode's failings is unfortunately seen in the character of Donna's daughter Rose. The tackling of the concept of transgender identity through the character of Rose Noble is ham-fisted at best, and the fact that it was written by a 60-year-old cisgender man really does jump out at you.
You're assuming he as a pronoun.
True. Yes, sorry, good point.
With Rose's identity being at the forefront of the episode's sadly lackluster climax. Speaking of, the climax itself is a classic Russell T Davies reset button, with both the Meep's attempts to destroy London and the Metacrisis death sentence being reset to a point of no consequences, which is normally a forgivable flaw of his work, as it is often made up for in spades by the strength of his character writing. For example, Series 3's The Last of the Time Lords similarly features a massive reset of the plot, but compensates with the strength of the character moments around it. However, in The Star Beast, the character dynamics become confused as soon as the Metacrisis re-enters the plot. For example, the Metacrisis passing from mother to daughter is the explanation for why Rose chose the name Rose when she transitioned, a reference to Rose Tyler, and is expressed further through the dolls she makes that resemble aliens that Donna and the Doctor encountered in their travels, as well as a Lupari. However, this is a complex topic, and the vague way in which it's presented could leave viewers with the impression that the Metacrisis caused Rose to transition in the first place, which would be an extremely insensitive representation of the complicated topic of gender dysphoria at best. Now, I do think the fact that Rose's dead name comes from an old Greek word for doctor lends us enough evidence to accept that this is not the intended reading, but it is sadly left a little bit too ambiguous in the text itself. Finally, Rose Noble's gender identity is, as I said, front and center in the climax of the episode. Yet we never actually get a full confirmation on what that specific identity is. We know she's transgender, but during the Metacrisis sequence, she says non-binary, and Donna literally says she is not binary.
We're binary.
She's not, because the Doctor's
Male
and female.
And neither. And more.
Which appears to be saying that she is also non-binary. But that is never actually said to us until this point, which leads to a climax where this specific facet of a character is integral to the plot, and yet we only learn about it after the fact, leading to the climax feeling unearned, not to mention a bit silly, as this element just comes out of nowhere to sort of arbitrarily dismiss the conflict. In addition to this, the resolution to the fact that the Metacrisis will kill Donna and Rose if they don't find a way to get rid of it is that they simply choose to let it go. This is an actively bad resolution to a once devastating and thematically poignant end for Donna's character from Series 4, as it takes away from the threat of the Metacrisis in its entirety. If the Metacrisis can just be let go of, why didn't Donna do that in the first place? The Metacrisis is the result of a Time Lord mind being crammed into a human head. What does that even mean to just let it go? This climax fails on the most basic level by having its resolution be something no one can relate to, without even attempting to add in an element of relatability. For example, in Doomsday, the Doctor and Rose Tyler are separated and trapped in different universes. Not a single person in the audience has ever been in that situation, but most people understand the emotions behind having to leave someone you love behind, making that resolution emotionally resonant. What exactly am I as a viewer supposed to latch onto emotionally about an alien mind in a human brain just disappearing? Add on to that the very weird line about a male-presenting Time Lord never understanding the idea of letting go, and it all just kind of leaves a sour taste in the mouth. Finally, and most nitpickily, the pre-credits sequence recapping the events of Series 4, Once Upon a Time Lord, He's just very cheap looking, and it detracts from the experience, but frankly, it's clearly a last-minute addition meant to catch up casual viewers, so there are obviously bigger issues in the episode to worry about. In conclusion, the negatives of this episode are heavily focused on a lackluster climax and a heavy-handed mishandling of sensitive themes, but fantastic performances and the very good first half allow for an overall enjoyable experience, culminating in my final score of a very weak 7 out of 10. As this is the first episode we've covered, that does make it, for now, the best and worst episode of this era of Doctor Who. With the TARDIS spinning out of control, the Doctor and Donna end up stranded on a mysterious spaceship in the furthest reaches of space. But unbeknownst to them, they are not alone. Free from the burden of having to resolve the meta crisis or reintroduce old characters, this special is free to take its place as a classic Doctor Who adventure, without being majorly tied to any arcs or events. The plot is elegant in its simplicity. A big spaceship, two main characters pursued by creatures that are slowly becoming them, and a twist reveal that the creatures copy them using their thoughts, and the words they've been hearing are a countdown towards the spaceship becoming a bomb. Now, I know I emphasized the quality of the performances in The Star Beast as a positive aspect that can help distract from that special's negatives, but I need to make it clear that in this special the performances are not merely good, they are transcendent. What is in essence a two-hander between Catherine Tate and David Tennant is elevated into a tense, thrilling nightmare as the Doctor and Donna find themselves pursued by mysterious and imperfect duplicates. Despite his own insistences that he played the character no different to his previous outings, Tennant's performance here as the 14th Doctor firmly cements what makes him different from his 10th incarnation. The differences run far deeper than the obvious, such as the comedic revelation of the Doctor's new sexuality or the visibly more aged appearance. Gone is the reckless arrogance, the barely repressed rage of the Time Lord victorious, here replaced by a Doctor who is struggling to open up, but still trying. A Doctor who is ready now to hold on to those he loves, rather than let them disappear from his life forever. Evidenced by how when the TARDIS disappears due to hostile entities being present, and Donna begins to panic, the Doctor quickly moves past his initial anger to be open and warm to her, desperately trying to reassure her, showing a marked level of emotional growth from previous iterations. These nuances are subtle, so subtle that with a lesser actor they might have been lost, but Tennant's mastery of his craft allows for these slight differences to be obvious without being blunt. Instinctively one can sense that there has been a change in demeanor, without it feeling like the writers are just outright telling you to think that. In addition, Tennant's performance as the Not Doctor is simple but effective. The Not Doctor is calm, detached, and considered, lacking the familiar hyper-energy we associate with the Doctor, as he carefully observes the Doctor's thoughts to understand the situation. Tennant's performance is utterly brilliant, but an episode with two actors requires an equally brilliant partner, and it would be a struggle to find one better than Catherine Tate. Tate's performance as Donna in this episode is beyond exceptional. Her portrayal of a Donna who doesn't lack the curious and excited nature of her younger self, but instead has had it tempered by the years of caring for her family, with her primary goal being just to get home to them, is the reason this episode works emotionally. Additionally, the heartbreaking performance she gives when the Doctor seems to have left her behind and taken the Not Donna with him by mistake was so moving that it genuinely led me to believe for a second that Donna was about to be killed off. I cannot heap enough praise on the performances here, but sadly there must come a time to move on, and so now we find ourselves discussing the writing and general concepts of this episode. What we have here in its barest essentials is a Moffat-esque plot about creatures who turn the Doctor's most powerful weapon against him, his mind. The decision to have the monsters read and feed off of the Doctor and Donna's thoughts, essentially making the core conflict of the episode a creature that will figure out how to stop itself from being destroyed as soon as the Doctor figures out that it is going to be destroyed, and that the mysterious announcements are a countdown to the spaceship reconfiguring into an imperceptibly slow bomb, is incredibly clever, and the kind of concept that all but guarantees a classic episode in the making. The finale to this is tight, tense, and incredibly gratifying when the Doctor realizes that if the creatures aren't able to stop the ship from self-destructing, a time machine would know that the danger had gone and rematerialize itself in time to save them. As mentioned previously, the aspect of the Doctor nearly taking the wrong Donna with him is a superb bit of added tension right at the end that really does throw the audience for a loop on whether or not Donna will survive. Finally, I really appreciate the attempts to use some of the mishandled ideas of the previous era as a source of emotional conflict within the Doctor going forward, such as when the not Donna begins to taunt him with the devastation of the flux and the loneliness at the core of the timeless child, reinforced when he brings the topic back up with real Donna and seems almost disappointed that she doesn't remember it, leaving him to deal with his emotions again alone. Really, the only thing to dislike in this episode is the awkward execution of the background of the ship's main hallway, which is such a specific and small criticism. I wouldn't even have mentioned it if I had anything else to complain about. And I love complaining. Ultimately, Wild Blue Yonder is in my mind an episode that earns a 10 out of 10, placing it well above The Star Beast as a fantastic episode that weaves back in past themes of Donna's self-perception and the Doctor as a man without a home, as well as advancing the new idea that the Doctor needs to slow down, as his constant speed is the thing that almost gets him and Donna killed, while also providing a well-placed, clever narrative that innocuously sets up the status quo for the next era. Oh yeah, I didn't mention that, did I? So, on the ship at the edge of the universe, the Doctor invoked a superstition against the Not Things. A simple trick with salt. It was just meant as a distraction, but as the Doctor implies, at the edge of reality itself, where the walls are thin, an invocation might sound an awful lot like an invitation to the wrong person. And as it happens, our next episode stars the wrong person. So, here we are at the last of the 60th anniversary specials, an episode that serves as a sort of finale for the 2005 revival of Doctor Who, a last hurrah for the emotionally fraught, angst-ridden interpretation of the character, ready to replace itself with a new version, free of the Time War baggage that has cast its shadow over the preceding 13 seasons, even if we're still not quite free of the whole Gallifrey being destroyed thing, but baby steps. The Giggle was a controversial episode within Doctor Who fandom for a number of reasons that I promise we're going to get to, but I feel like it's only right to inform you up front that I do actually really like this episode. And it is my hope that by the end of this section, you might not agree with me, but maybe you'll understand why I think so. So, let's begin. The Giggle is an episode that sets the stage properly for the new state of the Doctor Who universe following the events of The Flux and Wild Blue Yonder. The Giggle is kind of a hard episode to talk about just because of the fact that it is absolutely packed with things to talk about, which makes it quite difficult to find an angle of entry for discussion. It is within the Giggle that we discover that the salt trick the Doctor performed in the previous episode started a domino chain of effects leading to what I can only describe as the eclipse from Berserk, but less rapey. Berserk's eclipse being the event that changes that world from a fairly grounded medieval setting with a few weird phenomena to a full-on fantasy world. Part of the Whoniverse's transition to a more fantasy-inspired rule set is the apotheosis, or ascension to godhood, of a handful of Doctor Who's past villains, namely the Trickster, the Mara, one we're going to get to later, and of course our villain for this episode, the no longer celestial Toymaker. The plot of this episode is quite complex, so for the sake of everyone being on the same page, let's summarize. The Doctor and Donna arrive back in modern-day London to find the world has gone insane, with everyone they come across maintaining the belief that they are absolutely right about everything, refusing to compromise even to the point of endangering themselves. Shocked, the two are taken to Unit Tower, the new headquarters of the Unified Intelligence Task Force. It is here they meet old faces, frequent collaborator Kate Lethbridge-Stewart and erstwhile companion Mel Bush, to name a few, and discover two key pieces of information. One, that UNIT conveniently have devices called Z-Dexes that protect them from becoming rabid like everyone else, although they can't convince anyone outside of UNIT to wear them. And two, within every television screen there is a single repeated arpeggio, a giggle that dates back to the very first television broadcast from 1925. Heading to 1925 Soho, the Doctor and Donna discover the one behind this is none other than the Toymaker, an extra-dimensional entity now ascended to godhood thanks to the aforementioned salt trick. While inside the Toymaker's domain, the Toy Room, Donna and the Doctor are taunted by the villain with the Doctor's failures to save previous companions, and the memory of the flux which ravaged the universe. Understanding that the only way to beat the Toymaker is to play his game, the Doctor challenges him to a simple game, highest card wins, in which the Toymaker claims victory. The Doctor then claims that since he won the last game many years ago in their first encounter, it is now best of 3, and there must be one final game played. The Toymaker agrees and proclaims their final battle shall be in 2023, before escaping with the Doctor and Donna in quick pursuit. They arrive back at Unit in time for a final showdown with the Toymaker, who now claims that since he last faced a previous Doctor, and has now bested this Doctor, by rights he must then play this game with the next Doctor, shooting the Doctor with a big laser, beginning the regeneration process. However, presumably due to the Toymaker's meddling, or the salt trick, this causes a mythical phenomenon known as a bigeneration to occur, which is a complicated mess that we will come back to, but for the moment all you need to know is the Doctor splits in two. The new 15th Doctor, played by Ncuti Gatwa, and the 14th Doctor, played by David Tennant, together challenge the Toymaker to the oldest game, catch. They throw a ball around very dramatically until the Toymaker fails to catch it and is banished, returning to that liminal space recurring villains inhabit until they are next needed for a plot. Doctors 14 and 15 decide that the only way to proceed is for 14 to continue the way he needs to create the conditions for 15 to exist, which is to say, he needs to live on Earth and get therapy. 15 claims his prize from beating the Toymaker, which turns out to be his TARDIS, the same TARDIS but from the future, now with added jukebox and wheelchair ramp. And the 14th Doctor is seen eating dinner with the Noble family, finally resting and peaceful, while 15 travels off in his TARDIS ready for the next adventure. So a lot just happened there, but let's break it down and talk about each major element. Firstly and foremostly, the emotional arc the Doctor has sustained across these 3 specials. From the very beginning of the 14th Doctor's existence, there has been this sort of breathless non-stop pace to his life, immediately going from his regeneration into the comic liberation of the Daleks, then straight on to the mini-episode, Destination Skaro, then the specials, the Star Beast, Wild Blue Yonder, the Giggle, all without a moment of rest, constantly rushing off to face some new danger. As Donna observes outside the Toymaker's emporium, the Doctor is busy every second of every day, and all of this has finally reached a breaking point where all the pain and the trauma and the action and the loss need time to settle. In short, the Doctor is burning out, leading to the inevitable, that he needs to stop and take a break. This plotline, in my opinion, is very well executed, not only through the once again fantastic performances from the main cast, but also by maintaining a breathless pace across all of the media containing the 14th Doctor, even down to this incarnation not suffering any post-regenerative amnesia or choosing his own outfit. Instead, this new identity is just thrust to the fore, fully formed and ready for action. The usage of this idea to explain an old face coming back is frankly going to be something that varies in appreciation from person to person. I quite like it as a sort of visual marker of the Doctor's fatigue, that his new life is a visibly more aged and tired version of a previous incarnation, as if the Doctor doesn't care who he ends up becoming, as long as he can get back to work as soon as possible, as well as serving as a message to the Doctor to seek out his friends, in the same way that the 12th Doctor's face was a reminder of the promise he made after 900 years of war on Trenzalore. The Toymaker's taunting of the Doctor with his past failures to protect the universe and those he loves are also a great way to link the emotions of the Doctor's fatigue to the viewer's past feelings of loss when seeing certain companions leave, bringing the viewer in cleverly on the emotions of the scene. I also think the resolution of this plot is rather clever, pulling a future Doctor forward so that all of the necessary rest and relaxation can take place off-screen, so viewers can come back to the next episode ready for a fresh new Doctor with a fresh new perspective. Complementing this internal conflict within the Doctor is the main plot, starring the God of Games himself. The changes that have been made to the Toymaker since his last appearance are, to me, very interesting. Firstly, and most obviously, the Toymaker is now played by Neil Patrick Harris rather than the late Michael Gough, with a bold, flamboyant and theatrical new persona to boot. Harris is excellent in the role, blending the silly chaotic antics seamlessly with the more threatening moments, setting up the stakes of the episode clearly without falling into the trap that many chaotic villains do of turning the threat of the episode into a farce or of seeming like a cheap knockoff of Heath Ledger's Joker. For an example of this, the sequence in Unit Tower of the Toymaker dancing to Spice Up Your Life is an obviously silly and humorous scene. But when he murders two people mid-dance, and the immediate response from the Doctor is a simple, heartbroken, "They're dead, I'm sorry," this teaches us not to underestimate the Toymaker's apparent silliness, as it is merely a facade concealing an infinitely threatening villain. Another obvious change comes in the character's inherently Orientalist origins, from the Mandarin attire to the double meaning of the word celestial, being reimagined in a character who now outwardly displays racial prejudice, from the usage of a very stereotypical evil German accent to the thinly veiled racial comments he makes to Charles Banerjee in the cold open. This, to my mind, is a very good way to adapt the character to the modern day, not by ignoring the outdated stereotypes and ideas involved in their creation, but instead by acknowledging them and rooting them in the character themselves. Apart from this, the differences between Harris's Toymaker and Goff's are mostly in the scale, with every facet of the original's personality turned up to 11, the theatricality, the manipulation, a change that complements not only the faster pace of modern Doctor Who, but also the idea that as the Toymaker has grown into his newfound godhood, he has also grown into more of himself, becoming more and more extreme. In addition, the Toymaker's effect on the world is very interesting. To use his own words, he has created an endless game where everybody always wins, essentially making everyone believe that they are always right all of the time, with a not very concealed shot at social media thrown in there just in case you hadn't caught on to that yet. For example, when Kate Stewart takes off her Z-Dex, she becomes paranoid and distrustful, even going as far as to accuse scientific advisor Shirley Ann Bingham of faking her need for a wheelchair because of her limited mobility allowing her to stand, an intentionally absurd accusation that sadly ended up being more of a premonition after certain online sections of the fandom saw her cross her legs in the Star Beast. God, I wish I was joking. The Toymaker gushes over human games, from Tetris to ghosting, declaring that he could never leave this world, providing some very light social commentary on top of everything else going on in this episode. The resolution to the Toymaker's plot is one that I've seen called rushed or underwhelming, but personally, I do appreciate the consistent internal logic. I'll explain. When you bring a show like Doctor Who to the point where your main character is facing off against literal gods or godlike entities, it is of the utmost importance that you establish consistent rules as to how these encounters should take place, so that the audience can follow along easily with very conceptual ideas. This episode establishes the two major rules for how Doctor Who will deal with its pantheon of villains in the forthcoming era, these being number 1. While a god has total control over the specific domain that they represent, in the Toymaker's case, games, they are also bound by the rules of that domain and can be banished by figuring out the rules and using their own domain against them, that essentially being the Doctor's win condition. Number 2. When a god is defeated, their zone of influence lingers, allowing for strange phenomena to occur, such as the 15th Doctor summoning his own TARDIS from the future using a cartoonish hammer. That first rule is the one I'd like to focus on, as I feel it's the reason why this resolution and those to come are often thought of as being too quick and easy. As a viewer, when one is presented with a character described as a god, the instinctive reaction is to imagine that it will take some act of great effort, likely mixed with even greater loss, to defeat them, if victory is even possible at all. But with Doctor Who's neat idea of finding the key to each god's demise being the bulk of the conflict, this can leave one feeling as if the actual conflict part of the conflict is small or underwhelming. Personally, I'm a big fan of the simple logic behind defeating each member of the Pantheon. Using a basic, simple game like Catch to defeat the god of games himself provides the characters an assurance that he cannot bend the rules in the same fashion he did all the way back during the first Doctor's era with the Trilogic game, while also calling back to the Toymaker's earlier comment about the ball being the first game ever invented, a game that would outlast humanity itself. I would not necessarily blame anyone for finding this too simple or underwhelming, But personally, the internal logic seems sound to me, and it does the job perfectly well to close out the conflict of an episode. And now we come to the third and most controversial major element of this episode, the bi-generation itself. Quite frankly, I believe that a lot of the outrage surrounding this comes from the lack of explicit explanation in the script of what it is. Now, with that said, there are various moments that heavily lead one towards the idea that the 14th Doctor's physical change has merely been delayed until such time as he is mentally healthy, and I guess he poofs into a puff of smoke to re-emerge as Ncuti Gatwa in 2023, essentially making this a closed loop where 15 is 14's future self. These moments, Donna saying that 15 is older than 14, 15 clearly having benefited from the rest and therapy that 14 is about to embark on, even referring to it as therapy in reverse, the confirmation in the subsequent season that 15's TARDIS is the same TARDIS as 14's just from a different point in time, and the fact that the Toymaker first refers to 15 as the next Doctor, all lend credence to this closed-loop theory. But, while arguably less egregiously confusing than the meta-crisis resolution from the Starbeast, as there is at least some small explanation, this does share the core problem that the general audience is left with an unclear interpretation of what has just happened. Future episodes will complicate this even further, but here the closed-loop reading holds. To be clear, I don't think this vagueness is an easy problem to fix, and I think to a certain extent the ambiguity itself is intentional, ambiguity being a favourite tool of Russell T Davies. But it isn't very good to leave the audience confused at what actually happened in an episode, especially when you are using this episode to set up a new era. Now, a major risk an idea like this takes on is that the previous Doctor could overshadow the newer guy, not forcing the audience to accept the fact that the new Doctor is going to be the Doctor from here on out. The Giggle skirts this issue on the strength of Ncuti Gatwa's performance alone. From the moment Gatwa appears on screen, his magnetic energy and charisma instantly establishes him as the guy to watch, and the choice to have him be the one who wins the game against the Toymaker allows him to be the conquering hero, essentially stepping into the role that the 14th Doctor is just about to step out of. The handing of the torch in this episode only works so well because of Gatwa's ability to become the Doctor, perfectly conveying the idea that this is the same man carrying the same memory of loves and losses alike, but now in a place where he can continue, unburdened by what has been and ready to face what can be. And it's on that note that the Giggle leaves us, with an epilogue for the 14th Doctor now settled with the Noble family, and a fresh new face zooming off into the next adventure. Overall, the Giggle is an interesting episode. There is so much going on in it at all times that it feels like it's going to veer off the tracks at any moment, but it somehow manages to stay the course and deliver an emotionally resonant, if somewhat vague, end to the Time War-heavy modern era of Doctor Who, as well as a new beginning to continue, mostly free from the shackles of previous events. With all this in mind, I find it only fair to give the Giggle an 8 out of 10. Being exactly the kind of sincere, campy extravaganza that a 60th anniversary for a TV show deserves. Its coherent narrative, endlessly entertaining villain, and emotional weight places it firmly above the well-meaning misfire of the Starbeast, but its ambition also means that it doesn't nearly reach the narrative heights of the much more simple and effective Wild Blue Yonder. So, reaching the end now, let's talk about and evaluate the 60th anniversary as a whole. The aim of these specials was clearly not to provide a mammoth spectacle akin to Day of the Doctor, but to close out the revival era of Doctor Who and set us up with a clean slate heading into the 15th Doctor's tenure. I think this goal was kind of achieved. I'm torn. The epilogue for the 14th Doctor and the 2005 revival as a whole was, in my opinion, very well executed, with an emotionally satisfying and narratively sensible ending that allows us to move on from a Doctor laden down by years of lore-heavy trauma. On the other hand, the clean slate that needed to be provided here was, I believe, simply not. As we will see in future episodes, the 15th Doctor will go on to face further members of the Pantheon, and not only will the rules of those engagements be based on those established in the Giggle, but the Doctor will specifically call out his battle with the Toymaker as the first time he's faced these godlike beings. I am not usually one to worry too much about whether or not newer viewers can understand what's going on. After all, I started watching the show with reruns that practically did a different Doctor every episode, and I still got the general idea of what was happening. But tying these recurring villains up with 15 so much does give the impression that one is supposed to have seen the Giggle, which itself directly references series 5 to 10, 12, and 13, as well as being a sequel to series 4. This ambiguity of what one is meant to watch to get started, not helped by the fact that outside of the UK and Ireland, Disney Plus only has the 60th anniversary specials in the new series, creates a slightly messy experience for anyone trying to get started. In addition, there are also criticisms that the 60th doesn't feel like an anniversary, mostly because of the lack of returning Doctors, but I think these criticisms are founded mainly in the superficial idea that an anniversary needs multiple Doctors. The 60th provides us with a 4th Doctor comic villain, a returning Doctor companion duo, even if the Doctor is technically new, a returning 1st Doctor villain, a returning 80s companion, not to mention the fact that the Giggle has a scene featuring the 15th Doctor basically just listing the traumatic events of the show's history. For fuck's sake, guys, we got a Mavic Chen name drop on screen in 2023. Mavic Chen. Just because we don't have a massive multi-Doctor extravaganza like Day of the Doctor, or an overtly fan-servicey nostalgia wank like Power of the Doctor, doesn't mean that the 60th isn't still engaging with and celebrating the years of television that preceded it. To put it short, while the 60th anniversary absolutely does suffer from its failings, primarily in the form of the classic Russell T Davies narrative ambiguity, the positives here far outweigh the negatives, and in my opinion it's a perfectly serviceable anniversary that invites us to relax and reset a bit before embarking on a new adventure with our favourite Time Lord. And that's kind of all I had to say on the matter, really. I realise now I had far more to say than I previously thought I did, which is certainly not a good sign given that my inspiration for making these videos was my complicated feelings about Ncuti Gatwa's second season. But I promise in time we will get to that. In the meantime, I'd like to thank you guys so much for watching this. If you liked the video, you know what to do. There'll be a second one on the way by the time you see this, and who knows where it goes from there, if anywhere. So yeah, to sum up, thank you for watching, and hopefully I'll see you here next time.